I think I'll probably start because we will be running through till about 3:30. I know the carers support one was having quite a lot of people who were going to it, so there's I think about 60 people registered for the carer support one. So that's where most people are, I imagine. So just to introduce myself, that's me, I'm Ciaran. I've worked in Dorset in the eating disorder service since 1991, and in eating disorders, in Dorset since 1993, and in eating disorders since 1990. And what I'm going to try and talk to you about is a little bit about what has happened to the service in the last number of years, with a specific emphasis on meeting the new model of care that has been proposed by the NHS England document, which was the access and waiting time guidance. But I also want to talk a bit about transitions in our service, something that we've been working to, that we've come up with what we think is a reasonable solution to remove transitions in the service. There will still be transitions out of the service, but hopefully transitions within the service will be reduced. So what the access and waiting time document had some principles, and I've picked out a number of them which really make sense given what we heard this morning from both Ulrika and others about that it's vital that children and young people with eating disorders and their families and carers can access help quickly, but that help has to be evidence-based. It can't just be someone who'll see them and then doesn't know what to do with them. Yeah? So that's key, and we know it's better recovery rates, leads to fewer relapses, and reduces the need for inpatient admissions the sooner they start. And the standards that have been set in this guidance are 4 weeks from referral to treatment. Originally, when the document was produced, it was 15 days from referral to assessment. And then it went back, it was consulted on, and it came back out and said 4 weeks from first contact. If it's an urgent case, it's 1 week, and in an emergency case, it's 24 hours. And the document, interestingly, it talks about a step change to meeting these targets 95% of the time by 2020. 95%, but it'll be recorded from 1st of April this year. They've started to record it. So they're already measuring services who got this money against those targets. So again, this is the other area that it broadened out the advice, was really saying that you need to respond to the broader needs of families and carers as well as the young person with an eating disorder. So actually extending what the responsibility was for in eating disorders to do that. Now, this has been traditionally much more the model in children and young people's services and less so in adult services. But I think it applies just as equally to offering more support to the people around people with eating disorders. And also, the other area that they're looking to develop evidence in is that can you actually demonstrate that you're delivering this type of care and you're having the sort of outcomes you need? Can you demonstrate that you are effective, and how can you do that, and can you put it out there so people can see it? They also, interestingly, made a point about identifying interventions which you should be training and supporting your staff to develop their skills in. So being more precise about the skill sets that people who work with people with eating disorders needed to have as a basis. Because these are the ones for which the evidence exists. And partnerships and transitions, and this talks not just about, if we take partnerships, it's working with primary care GPs, our acute medical colleagues, social care, education, to try and wrap around the issue of an eating disorder and try and make it that the whole community responds better to eating disorders. And here it talks about and support their transition between services. So certainly at the moment in the NHS there is what's called a sequin. It's not something on address, it's a thing for which you will receive 2.5% extra money if you have good transition between children and adolescents and adult mental health. You will receive, there's extra money available to demonstrate that. So what have we got in Dorset? At the moment we've got a community service for adults which was started in 1998, community service for people under 18 which started in 2011, and they're both commissioned by our single commissioner, which is Dorset Clinical Commissioning Group, and run by the Trust. Also in the Trust we have a 6-bedded inpatient and a 4-place day service commissioned by NHS England. So we have 2 commissioners, but community services are all commissioned by one commissioner, which is, from talking to colleagues around the country, that is great, having only one commissioner to relate to. In Dorset...
Sorry, can I just ask you, so that's only for your adults? The inpatient is only for your adults?
So inpatient treatment is 18 years and above. And the thing is, I'll share this now. In 2011, when we were putting forward the idea to have a community service for people with young people with eating disorders, we looked at inpatient bed usage, and in the year before, so 2010, 11, so April 10 to April 11, there were 1,440 occupied bed days for young people under the age of 18 with eating disorders in Dorset. And we set up the service in October 2011, and the highest there's been since then has been 700, and the lowest has been 360 something. So over that period we've halved, or even more than that, reduced the use of inpatient beds. So again, for a population the size of Dorset to have its own specialist inpatient eating disorder unit, because these beds are commissioned by NHS England, and at the moment we have people from Hampshire, Cornwall and Dorset in those beds. It's because NHS England, the majority are Dorset residents, but that's where they come from. So I don't know if there is a sufficient demand for us to have a specialist staffed inpatient unit for the demand that we have, because even the year that we have 700 occupied bed days, that's 2 people in the bed, in 2 beds every night. So it makes it hard to make the case economically. But the important thing is, if they go out of area, we have a community service that will remain in contact. That's the key. Because sometimes what happens is when people go out of area, they lose contact with their local area, carers can't get there, there are issues like that. So this is the referral rate that we've encountered. So in 2011 we had 303, in 15-16 463 referrals to the service. So we had about a 50% increase over those 5 years of referrals to the service. So how have we gone about trying to transform our service? One of the things we started in July 2016, we now offer 7 days a week intervention. They didn't give us enough money to run the whole service 7 days a week, because there wasn't sufficient money available to do that, because it would cost an awful lot of money to run the service 7 days a week. But what we do offer is assessment and intervention, telephone support, and we have administrative support there to answer the telephone as well, just to make sure that the practitioner who's involved with patients will then follow up any other contact. If I was to be asked, was this a good idea longer term, I would suggest no. Because, and the reason I say this is because to create 7-day a week working, you take 2 days out of the week and you put them at the weekend. And we thought, well, maybe one of the misconceptions we had was that there'd be loads of people waiting to come and see us on a Saturday and a Sunday. They're not. People are not terribly keen, even if they're unwell, at coming on a Saturday and a Sunday. They'll come Saturday morning, we found. Saturday morning seems to be, sometimes appointments will be picked up, but no one has yet picked up an appointment on a Sunday, and less people on a Saturday afternoon, which is just interesting. But I'm talking to the CCG about this because I would like to discuss with them bringing that resource back into the week and extending our opening hours during the week, because I think that would probably meet people's needs. We did, before any of this happened, two of my colleagues said we must offer evening clinics. We must offer evening clinics. And we offered evening clinics for about 8 months. And it was because patients had asked for it. So we did that, we offered an evening clinic. But actually we then began to offer evening because those two patients were getting well and they were moving on, and there was gaps appearing in the evening clinics. And we offered people, come to the clinics. No, don't want it. So people didn't want to come, or very few people wanted to come in the evening. So again, although the assumption is that extending the opening hours is useful, I'm not sure it is for a specialist service. I think 7-day working, in my ideal world, I want 7-day working to emergency response people. If I have an emergency on a Saturday, I want to be able to go, talk to someone, get contact with someone and have the emergency dealt with there and then. And that sounds like a crisis team within Children and Young People Service, well staffed, available all the time. Because we work, some people work 8 to 4 on a Saturday and a Sunday, 9 to 5, 10 to 6 on a Saturday and Sunday, whichever they do. The crisis won't happen then, just like it doesn't happen like that during the week. So anyway, I would like to discuss with our local CCG the uptake of appointment and the use of the resources on 7-day week working. So the next thing is self-referral. Anyone can refer to our service, including the patient and the parent. So just ring up, you can refer. And when we first talked about it, everyone said, oh no, you can't introduce that because you'll be run over in the rush. There's a whole load of people out in the community just waiting for you to introduce self-referral to present themselves for eating disorder treatment. I've worked in the field of eating disorder for 23 years. There are not that many enthusiastic eating disorder patients waiting for the opportunity to self-refer. They're not. People with eating disorders, a lot of the time, turn up with someone else. So as I said, it's the 4-week, 1 week, 24 hours. Those are the goals that we have now to start working to. And we're already reporting to them in those. We were actually part of the shadow reporting last year, looking at where the targets were. So support for families and carers, we chose to utilise some of the money we bought to increase our systemic family therapy skill set so that we could offer multi-family groups more frequently. So we've gone from 4 times a year to 6 times a year. So again, reducing the wait from starting treatment as an individual so that we can get the family into work much more quickly. So that's where we were trying to do that. We also are aware that there's a lot of that there's been a lot of development in carers training. So we invested in bringing down the team, Jill and Jenny and all the gang down, but we trained a cohort of staff and carers. So we put them all together. So we put about 20 people together, so lots of staff from the service and lots of carers of people with eating disorders, and trained them to deliver the carers training. So they went through the training themselves and then they were trained to deliver the training. And that was fantastic. For all sorts of reasons, we now have a cohort of people who can deliver the carers training, but equally some of my staff talked about the benefit of going through the training with carers, because they really got an insight into what the carers were going through, and an awareness that we see the patients with the best will in the world. We might see a patient 2 hours a week, and the carer lives with them usually, so they're with them a lot. So having the skills and the abilities to help in a way I think is very powerful, and it certainly has helped some of the staff be less and less, pushing up against carers and expecting them to do things. But it's just giving them more insight into what's happening. So that was an unintended consequence. I didn't plan that. That was just the fact that I thought I'm going to spend an awful lot of money doing this carers training, so I'm going to get lots of people in training together. We also have developed what we call a complex family clinic, because we know that multi-family groups are really effective, and it's based on the Maudsley model, so very effective, very helpful, but equally that there's some families that just won't come to that group, just won't come. We can't get them there. So we've ended up having a complex family clinic. And we have the traditional care support groups, which run Wednesdays and Thursdays on the last of the month. And I know I talk about an all-age eating disorder service, and I do, but we have 2 separate care support groups. And that's a legacy of how we've always run it. And the Children and Young People's care support group runs in a particular way, and the adult care support group tends to focus more on our inpatient and day service group of staff. It's those carers that tend to come to that group, and the community carers don't tend to come to it, which is something that we have to do something about. So outcomes, we've done a lot of Children and Young People's IAP training. So IAP is improving access to psychological therapies, and we've enrolled people on systemic training, on developing some of this skills around the management of anxiety and depression. And we've done that specifically to try and manage more of the comorbidity within our own team, rather than feeling that we have to refer out to CAMS to treat some of that. Yeah? We also have employed someone who has skills in trauma, so she works with complex OCD. So we've added those, using some of this money, we've added those resources to the team to try again to manage more of the presentation internally. And we do quarterly reports to the teams on their outcomes. So the clinical outcome measures that they do are captured in what we call data summary sheets. We make up all these words, but they're data summary sheets. So it's demographic details, their scores on the questionnaires, physiological measures, and personal goals. And all of that is loaded onto a database and then run every quarter, where we produce a report showing what's happened to the patients who've been discharged from the service in that last quarter, for sharing with the team. I think outcomes is an ongoing piece of work in the health service, because it sounds great when I do the first bit, but in reality, this is a bit like turning a pond orange by using a pipette. It is not going to happen overnight. Some people just don't feel. I don't know if they don't feel committed, but they just don't do it. So they just don't fill it all in, and you have to chase them quite a bit. Trained and supported and evidence-based staff. So I've talked about the carers training. We've sent people on systemic therapy. We're supporting people to do further systemic therapy training. We've used the CBTE online training a lot. So every one of my community practitioners will do that. And it's great that it's still available and online, and we can develop competency. But it also means that there's quite a good understanding of the model across the board. And as I said about the Children and Young People's IAP training, and the multi-family training that Ivan Eisler and his team offer up in London, we have over the years sent nearly everybody up to get that training. So we've sent our systemic therapist and our administrator to go up at different times to make sure that everyone knows. And actually, sometimes I think the administrator remembers more of the training than some of my staff, because she will sit and talk about it, even though she's not necessarily part of the clinical team, but she remembers what we're supposed to do. And she speaks to lots of families on the phone every day. Yeah? So if someone rings up, she is at least up to date with it. And this is, so We've done a lot of liaison with our local paediatric and acute medical wards around marzipan, which is managing really sick people with anorexia nervosa. It's the guidance that was produced a number of years ago. There's marzipan and junior marzipan, and realistically, in one of our acute hospitals, we turned up to meet with them, and we were met by the endocrinologist with a copy of marzipan, because they had had a terrible experience where another area had sent them a patient with an eating disorder and left them there, because the person wasn't really doing that well. So they were very keen to operate with us just on the basis of marzipan. This is what we're supposed to do, Ciaran. You're the specialist service, you have to do the rest. And that was and we feel okay about that, because that's what we need to do. We do a lot of in-reach support to patients who are on the paediatric wards, or indeed on the adult general wards, just to try and, because I know Lisa was talking about mental health nurses and general nurses, but I think on paediatric wards and acute medical wards, they're just not used to having someone behaving in the way that some of our patients will behave. And it's very hard for them to feel like they want to look after this person who's rejecting care in comparison to everybody else they're looking after, who is sitting there being really grateful and thankful for everything that's going on. So having us check out, drop in, talk to them about the plan, sometimes provide meal support at meal times has helped. It really has helped. So it doesn't always go well. It doesn't always. We had a terrible situation where a patient ran out onto the road and had the police involved and absconded and did all sorts of stuff, and we had to have a big investigation afterwards, and it was all tightened up then, and it's like for a while it was like getting through the eye of a needle getting anyone back to that ward, but that's it. We didn't properly risk assess the person we sent over. We hadn't anticipated that they would become so unsettled, but that's something you have to manage. And we do. Our dietitian spends lots of time with the dietitians over there, just looking at that. And transitions is the bit that I do want to spend a little bit more time on. So why would you try and get rid of transitions in an eating disorder service? Well, the peak age of onset is mid-teens, and believe me, 2 or 3 years later. And it lasts for about 6 years. Thus, these disorders span the transition between child and adolescent services. It also has its own non-medical related transitions. So puberty, and they're leaving home, and they're going to university and starting jobs and getting into relationships. There's lots of stuff going on top of that. So these transitions, and in medical, in our services, transitions just seem to be the norm for them. So they're going from primary to secondary to tertiary, medical services, mental health services, child and adolescent services, adult services, family homes, student homes. So there's lots going on. So if you can, reducing them might be a good idea. NICE in 2004, there's a new set coming out this year, but one of the things it raised was about the risks of transitions, that people do get lost, they fall through the cracks, they get to 18, their transition doesn't work, they drop through the cracks, and then they don't reappear in treatment for years, and the eating disorder is more embedded. And as I said, the access and waiting time guidance really stresses the need to manage this properly. It's a key area, and actually the access and waiting time guidance has a lot to say on the role of GPs in the management of people in primary care, which is interesting as well. So what did we do? What we did was we decided we would remove the need for a transition at 18. So what we got put together within our service is a psychiatrist, a systemic therapist, an occupational therapist, a specialist nurse, a dietitian, and the service lead or community manager. And that team preferentially receive everyone aged 16 and above who gets referred to our service. So even they come in at 16, they're picked up by this team, their treatment team comes from this team, but all of this team work across the service. They don't stop working when the person comes 18. They will take them all the way through to the completion of treatment. People said to me when I first started, so there is this transition at 15 into 16, and then they have to come into this team. There isn't, if they're come into treatment at 14 or 14 and they're still in treatment at 16, the psychiatrist will be the same, their systemic therapist will be the same, and probably the dietitian will be the same. And then if we need to bring in people, if they still are with us at 19, we might then think that their needs have changed and the person who's been with them since 14 may not be the right one. But we would only move out one part of the team. It wouldn't be all of the team that we would take away. We would take out just that part of the team that wasn't going to follow them all the way through. So that's what we've worked to, because previously, if you worked with people up to the age of 18, you didn't work with them beyond then. And if you worked with people from the age of 18, you didn't work with people before then. So there was lots of negotiating about where you would hand people over. So some people said, oh, it was 17 and a half. Some people said, no, it was 17 and 364 days and 24 and a half hours or whatever it is. And some people said it wasn't until 18 and a half or 19. And interestingly, locally, we had consultants who did different things. So some consultants would start looking to transfer at 17, and some consultants would not start looking to transfer till they were 19 and a half. And of course, what began to happen then was that the person who was hanging on to people to 19 and a half got in trouble because they shouldn't be treating people over the age of 18. So doing this is an attempt to try and get round the idea that you only treat people of this age and you stop at 18. Going back to the inpatient episode, we were, it was suggested to us that we might want to go down to 16 for our inpatient beds. And actually we started to talk about that, and it became a nightmare. It became a nightmare to the point where we were going to have to vet every DVD that came onto the unit. Because everyone on the unit is 18 plus except this 17-year-old. And if a DVD was on the unit that was 18 plus viewing, what were we doing to safeguard that 17-year-old from watching 18 plus DVDs? So you can see where mental health care sort of gets lost in a bureaucracy of stuff that has got nothing to do with what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, there's a saying in Ireland, I wouldn't start from here when someone's looking for directions, you know. They wind down and they're like, well, how do I get to Cork? Well, I wouldn't start from here. I think sometimes some of the stuff I encounter in my daily working life in the NHS, I certainly wouldn't be starting from here. I'd be starting from somewhere completely different. I'm building services that were maybe running to 25, not to 25. But equally, I've discussed it with paediatricians, and they said, well, not everybody can fit into that sort of thing. We have to have, maybe it should be 0 to 14 and 14 to 25, and then a little more transitions. We'll have more hoops for people to jump through. But anyway. So that's how we've been working it. And so what helps us here in Dorset, because I'm mindful I think I've been really lucky. I have one commissioner, so I have to meet with one commissioner to discuss what we're going, and I have one specification, and I have written an all-age eating disorder specification in line with commissioning guidelines. So I've written it, and it's with them, and it's been with them since last July, and I haven't heard back. So I'm waiting to hear back to see if it's okay. But we're still operating to that specification because that's the way I've structured the service. So the other thing that I think has helped down here is that I'm the single manager. In 2011, they gave me the young person service. They said, here, you know, you're looking after adults. Can you look after children and young people's services? And I said yes. And that gives me a certain amount of freedom to direct resources to where they are needed. And at times, I have focused resources on children and young people to make sure that survived. And sometimes, you know, used more bank in my adult service than I would have liked, just to make sure it happened. And I think I'm really lucky now because I do have a whole cohort of skilled and dedicated staff working in Dorset now. And I think there's about 50 of us in the team looking after people with eating disorders in Dorset. I think our reputation is okay, and that helps us. You can't imagine how that helps in the politics side of things. And I know I'm not here to talk about the politics, but quite frankly, I've learned a lot about politics in the 15 years that I've been in charge of this. And managing the resources and how you get resources into eating disorders has been a really learning curve in terms of, and you have to be ahead of the game. If you've got no reputation, you have no way of opening the door. They will not even trust you with the money, you know, that. But once you have the money, once you have the reputation, they will then perhaps trust you. And you almost have to anticipate what your commissioner's needs. You do have to manage a real concern. When I first took over the management of the Children and Young People Service, I was invited into the Director of Children and Young People Services to talk to them about how I was to understand that in no circumstances was I to spend one penny with a wagging finger of money meant for children on adults. And I mean, I was left to no doubt that that's what I couldn't do. So that's a real concern. That is a real concern. Interestingly, that person then became my boss later and became less concerned about it. But anyway, but that's one of the things to manage if you're going to take this on. And I think there are confidentiality issues and statutory regimes that are different. The laws seem to change at 18. Yeah, that's where laws have been judged. But we try very hard not to do what sometimes happens at 18, where someone becomes 18 and the health service stops talking to their carers on the grounds of confidentiality. Yeah. We try very hard not to do that. And we work very hard if someone says, I don't want you to talk to my parents. Well, I want to know why. Well, what's that about? I don't just go, oh, okay. Well, what is it about? Because sometimes it's to do with control, particularly where the patient is doing risky things and is going home to live with their parents and says, you can't tell my parents that I'm doing these things. It's all right. You're behaving in a risky way. They're living in the same house as you. They need to know. Because they need to know what to do and how to respond. If they find you lying on the floor 3 o'clock in the morning, they go, oh, what's happened? And they know you're vomiting, and they have a pretty good idea of what they need to do, what the risks are. And it's another advantage of involving carers and doing carers training, that you can manage that a little bit better. We have as I said, there's a sequence now to have a transition protocol. And I was telling Ulrich the last time I talked a bit about transition, I was at a meeting, and the people who got up in front of me were a mother and a daughter and a consultant psychiatrist who developed a transition protocol between CAMHS and adult services. And they put it on our table, and it was 32 pages long, the transition protocol. And they will be getting their sequin, they'll be getting their 2.5%, because they have a wonderful transition protocol that covers every possible. And then I stood up and talked like I'm talking now about no transitions. And the carer and the daughter wanted to know why we couldn't have Dorsets in their area. But it's just one of the anomalies. Every year when they do the audit of the transition protocol, I fail, because I can't give evidence of transitions. Although I'd like to find out a way of doing that. So if someone could help me find a way of showing that this is better than transitions, it'd be really good. Because I don't have transitions, I can't give evidence of the transitions is any good. We do a lot of training and shadowing. So when new staff come to the team, they spend a lot of time shadowing other members of the team before they get active. So they do a lot. We also ask people to spend time on both our inpatient and day service. That's just to get a feel for what happens on there, even though they're employed for community staff. Supervision. This is essential. I think it's highly important. And we now have team supervision again. We had team supervision for years. A group analyst used to supervise us. And then we've got old hat, and we all knew one another, and we've been through it all, been there, done it, got the t-shirt. We were fantastic. So we stopped it. We're back at it again. Yeah? Because you do have to keep an eye on things, because teams have their own dynamics, and working in this area brings other challenges. And we've worked to a very clear idea of why we're doing things. Why do we want to do this? Because for most of us it seems ridiculous that we're sitting in offices beside one another and someone's getting up from this desk with a letter they've just typed
from the children and adolescent service to walk across the corridor to give a letter to the person in the adult service for a patient they want to hand over. That's just such a waste of resources. But it went on for years, even when we tried to get the transition, the all-age service. People were reluctant.
So, that slide just summarises what we've been trying to do. Yeah, and I'm already over. But if that's what we've been trying to do to create the all-age service, and that's it in about 5 bullet points. Yeah, 5 bullet points. What we're trying to do. And just to let you know, I gave you a slide at the start which said we had 303 referrals in 2011, of which 21 were under the age of 16. So about 7% of our referrals were younger people. With the changes and with the developments we've been doing, we have 463 referrals in last year, and nearly 20% are under the age of 16. So we believe that's some evidence that we're getting people younger. We're getting a higher percentage of people younger into our service, which is what we're trying to do. We're really trying to reach down lower and lower and lower to try and do the early intervention, because we know if you can do early intervention, there's a shorter duration of untreated episode. And interestingly, one of my key working colleagues is the early intervention in psychosis consultant nurse. And we used to talk about that model in psychosis, about finding people, and they could take people from 14 to 35, which I thought was always very interesting. So that's been part of what's influenced the direction we've gone in. And that's it. Any questions? Sorry, I've gone over time.